The story that we hear in our first reading is really the Facebook account for Naaman. You know how you have a horrible day and one thing goes right and that's what you put on Facebook? Well, that's what happened here. Because Naaman was a very important person in the country of Aram, next to Israel. We heard a field marshal of the king of Aram, a great man of high renown, a valorous hero who had brought the king's armies to victory. But as great as he was a leper, and he had tried everything for a cure, and nothing had worked. So desperate he was that this great man listens to the advice of a young serving girl who had been captured and kidnapped from Israel. She recommends the prophet of God in Israel. Seizing even this slightest of chances, Naaman requests permission, even gets a letter of recommendation from the king, and sets off. And because important people only talk to other important people, he goes not to the prophet, but to the king of Israel. And Naaman, with his whole entourage and a boatload of money, goes to the king of Israel, who realizes in a rare move for a politician that he can't do what he's being asked. And the king refuses in God's presence, tearing his clothes. Elisha, the prophet, hears of this and sends for Naaman. Naaman travels to Elisha's home, where his servants, Elisha's servants, tell Naaman to bathe in the river Jordan 7 times. At this point, Naaman is outraged, his dignity attacked, snubbed by Elisha, who didn't even come out to him in person, someone so mighty. Naaman is insulted, he is affronted, and he is offended by simple instructions given as if he were a child. And in a huff, Naaman turns back, ready to go back home, angry at the waste of time, pouting over the crude and simplistic instructions of what he could have done at home. His entourage tries to reason with him, but still the answer is no. And that brings us to the opening of our first reading. Something gets Naaman to swallow his pride. Perhaps it's the desperation of one more thing that didn't work. But whatever it is, he puts aside his anger, he puts aside his expectations, and he goes down to the river and bathes 7 times. And guess what? He's healed. That example, along with our other 2 readings today, makes the single most critical, significant, essential fact about prayer. You remember last week we were talking about faith, about having faith even when we struggle with doubt, when we're not so sure, when everything that we see and know seems contrary, when God is distant. Faith, I hope we learned, is not the absence of doubt or the absence of struggle or confusion or fear. It is not the absence of doubt, but the means to overcome it. And the little-known, little-quoted prophet Habakkuk gave us an insight into how faith works. When you are filled with doubt, when you are struggling, write the vision clearly so one can read it readily. For the vision still has its time. It presses on to fulfillment and will not disappoint. Wait for it. It will surely come. It will not be late. When we struggle, when we're confused or hurt or distant from God, that's when we need to double down. That's when we need to look again at what God has promised, understanding, even if only intellectually, so that we are not the rash one without integrity, as Habakkuk says, but the one saved by faith. So faith is not how I feel. It's not what I do. It's not what I want or even hope for. Nope. Faith is recognizing, no matter how small, and retaining, no matter how tentatively, the vision God has given us. A vision of love and mercy and compassion brought to us in his Son, given to us freely and fully by Jesus Christ. And we can only hold on, we can only double down and understand better, even grow the vision within ourselves and through us in this world through prayer, through quiet mental prayer. That's why today's readings, especially the example of Naaman, are so important. It's what Paul stresses for his beloved Timothy, and it's what Jesus indicates is perhaps the most important thing for God: showing up. Showing up. The most important thing you need to know about prayer, we need to know about prayer. The first thing and the last thing, and a great number of things in between, is showing up. Going to and making yourself available to God. You've heard the adage that showing up is half the battle. Well, with prayer, it is far more than half. And especially when one begins to pray, it is 100% of the battle. And, truth be told, the only way to victory. Prayer is as simple as bathing in the Jordan. Praying is showing up for God. Being vulnerable, making ourselves vulnerable to God. Naaman thought his healing should be more complicated, more complex, should involve some secret process that will open the mysteries of a cure, and of course take into account his exalted status. But no, none of that. It is as simple as bathing in the river. Sometimes I think we're like Naaman, that they're thinking that there has to be a hidden, mysterious secret that makes praying easy, or at least more fruitful. A complex process that I haven't learned yet, or a personalized action plan taking into account my status, whether lofty or not. But prayer is none of that. Prayer is simply showing up to God, even hesitatingly, even angrily. And Paul tells his beloved Timothy that God is always faithful, always open to hearing us, never chained, no matter what we are experiencing, what we feel, or what we see happening. And Jesus tells the one who showed up that it is not just physical healing he has received, but in presenting himself to God, in showing up, he has received salvation. Like love, like faith, prayer is messy. It is incomplete, it is confusing, maddening, empty, desolate, a waste of time, disconcerting, changing what I think and know and say and do. But also, like love and faith, prayer is the best of time. It is soothing, it is consoling, it is fulfilling, it is guiding, it is fruitful, it is personable, and even joyful. We cannot love in theory, nor can we believe in theory, and we cannot pray in theory. To be in love, to have faith, to pray, we need to show up.